7 signs your finances are better than you think. Do you ever scroll through social media and feel like everyone else has their financial life figured out while you're barely keeping your head above water? You see friends posting vacation photos, coworkers buying new cars, and influencers flashing designer bags, and suddenly your own financial situation feels completely inadequate. Here's the brutal reality. That nagging voice in your head constantly whispers, "You're behind. You're failing. You're not doing enough." You look at your bank account and feel embarrassed. You avoid talking about money because you assume everyone else is doing better. But what if I told you that this feeling of financial inadequacy is actually lying to you? The truth is, most people dramatically underestimate their financial wellness. While you're beating yourself up for not having 6 figures in the bank, you might already be ahead of 60 to 70% of Americans without even realizing it. The signs of financial health aren't always obvious, and they're definitely not what social media makes them seem. In this video, I reveal 7 signs that prove your financial situation is healthier than it feels. Sign number 7, it's the indicator that shows you're already ahead of 70% of Americans, even if you don't realize it. Before we dive into the first one, hit subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos, and comment "better than I think" along with one financial win you've had recently. Thank you so much, and now we're getting started. Sign 1. You worry about money. The first sign that your finances are better than you think is counterintuitive and might surprise you. You actually worry about money. I know this sounds backwards, but hear me out. That constant anxiety about your budget, that nagging concern about your savings, that voice in your head questioning every purchase, these aren't signs of financial failure. They're signs of financial consciousness, and they put you miles ahead of people who spend money without thinking about consequences. In the prosperous kingdom where vast treasuries determined the security and survival of entire civilizations, there lived 2 men entrusted with protecting their community's most valuable resources. Both possessed equal access to wealth management tools and bore similar responsibilities for their people's financial welfare. Yet their approaches to resource protection would create dramatically different outcomes for their community's long-term prosperity. The first man, known as the Vigilant Guardian, understood that protecting wealth required constant awareness and careful monitoring of every resource movement. Each day, the Vigilant Guardian would systematically review treasury levels, analyze spending patterns, and evaluate whether each expenditure truly served his community's best interests. This continuous oversight often created stress and anxiety, as he constantly worried about potential threats, waste, or misallocation of precious resources. The Vigilant Guardian's concern manifested as sleepless nights, questioning whether certain investments were wise, anxiety about future economic challenges, and persistent worry about whether current resource management strategies would adequately protect his people during difficult times. Outside observers sometimes viewed his constant concern as excessive or unnecessary stress. The second man, called the Careless Spender, believed that wealth management should be effortless and stress-free. He assumed that as long as resources were available, spending decisions required minimal thought or analysis. The careless spender would approve expenditures without detailed consideration, assuming that abundant resources meant careful monitoring was unnecessary. While the careless spender enjoyed a relaxed, worry-free approach to resource management, his lack of financial anxiety meant he remained unaware of gradual resource depletion, wasteful spending patterns, and growing vulnerabilities that threatened his community's long-term security. Years later, when economic challenges tested both communities, the contrast became clear. The Vigilant Guardian's constant worry had translated into careful planning, strategic reserves, and sustainable spending habits that protected his people during crisis. Meanwhile, the careless spender's community faced severe shortages because his worry-free approach had masked systematic financial mismanagement. Here's what that story reveals about financial worry. People who stress about money make better financial decisions than those who don't think about it at all. Your anxiety shows you're engaged with your finances rather than ignoring them, which automatically puts you ahead of millions of Americans who spend unconsciously. But financial consciousness is just the beginning. This next sign shows you have something most people desperately wish they had. Sign 2. You have options during emergencies. The second sign your finances are better than you think is that you have options when unexpected expenses arise. Maybe you have a small emergency fund, access to credit cards, family members who could help, or the ability to temporarily reduce other expenses. You might think these backup plans are inadequate, but having any emergency options puts you significantly ahead of most Americans. The shocking reality? 40% of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency without borrowing money or selling possessions. In the unpredictable wilderness, where harsh seasons and natural disasters could devastate entire communities without warning, there existed 2 settlements that approached emergency preparedness with completely different philosophies. Both communities possessed similar populations, resources, and leadership capabilities. Yet their strategies for handling unexpected crises would determine whether their people survived and thrived or faced catastrophic consequences. The first community, known as the Prepared Village, understood that survival required multiple contingency plans for various types of emergencies. The village leaders systematically developed diverse backup systems, stored grain supplies for food shortages, alternative water sources for drought conditions, emergency shelters for severe weather, and established relationships with neighboring communities for mutual aid during crises. While the Prepared Village's emergency preparations required ongoing investment of time and resources that could have been used for immediate comfort improvements, the community leaders recognized that multiple backup options provided essential security. Citizens sometimes questioned whether maintaining these various emergency systems was necessary, especially during peaceful periods when threats seemed distant and theoretical. The second community, called the Vulnerable Settlement, operated under the assumption that emergencies were unlikely and that resources were better spent on immediate needs and comfort improvements. The settlement's leaders believed that their current prosperity indicated they were safe from unexpected challenges, so extensive emergency planning seemed like unnecessary worry and resource waste. When the inevitable crisis struck the region, a combination of severe drought, crop failure, and supply route disruptions, the contrast between the two communities became stark and undeniable. The Prepared Village seamlessly activated their multiple backup systems, drawing from stored supplies, alternative water sources, and mutual aid agreements that sustained it through the difficult period with minimal suffering. Meanwhile, the Vulnerable Settlement faced immediate catastrophe because it had no alternatives when its primary systems failed. Citizens were forced to make desperate decisions, abandon their homes, or depend entirely on outside rescue that might not arrive in time. Here's what that story reveals about emergency preparedness. Having credit cards, family support, small savings, or any backup plan means you're not financially helpless. These options might feel inadequate, but they represent genuine financial security that millions of Americans lack. This next sign shows you've achieved something even more impressive than emergency preparedness. Sign 3. You're not living paycheck to paycheck. The third sign that your finances are healthier than you realize is that you're not completely dependent on your next paycheck for basic survival. Maybe you have $50 left over at the end of each month. Perhaps you can pay bills a few days early. Or you have enough buffer that a delayed paycheck wouldn't create immediate panic. These small financial cushions might feel insignificant to you, but they represent extraordinary financial management compared to most Americans. The startling reality? 64% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, meaning they would face an immediate crisis if their next payment was delayed even briefly. In the arid regions where water access determined the difference between community prosperity and desperate survival, there lived two settlement leaders who approached resource management with fundamentally different strategies that would determine their people's daily quality of life and long-term security. The first leader, known as the Steady River Keeper, had invested years in developing a reliable water management system that provided consistent flow regardless of daily weather variations or seasonal changes. Through careful planning, strategic storage, and efficient distribution networks, the Steady River Keeper ensured his community always had water reserves that extended beyond immediate daily needs. Citizens in this community could plan activities without constantly worrying about water availability, pursue long-term projects without fear of resource interruption, and sleep peacefully, knowing that tomorrow's water supply was already secured. The consistent surplus, even if modest, provided psychological peace and practical flexibility that enhanced every aspect of community life. The second leader, called the Desperate Well Digger, had never developed sustainable water management systems and instead relied on frantic daily searches for immediate water sources. Each morning brought urgent pressure to locate enough water for that single day's survival, with no reserves or buffer for unexpected challenges. The Desperate Well Diggers community lived in constant anxiety because any disruption in daily water discovery would create an immediate crisis. Citizens couldn't plan beyond today, couldn't invest in long-term improvements, and faced perpetual stress because their survival depended entirely on each day's successful resource gathering without any margin for error. When regional challenges affected both communities, the Steady River Keeper's people adapted calmly using their established buffer systems, while the Desperate Well Diggers community faced immediate catastrophe because they had no reserves to cushion unexpected disruptions. Here's what that story reveals about financial buffers. Any money left at month's end, even $50, represents successful resource management that puts you ahead of nearly 2/3 of Americans. That small cushion provides options and peace of mind that paycheck-to-paycheck living can never offer. Wait, this next sign shows you've mastered something that separates financially healthy people from chronic strugglers. Sign 4. You can afford small luxuries without guilt. The fourth sign your finances are healthier than you realize is that you can occasionally buy small luxuries without spiraling into financial anxiety or guilt. Maybe you grab coffee from your favorite shop, buy a book you want to read, or treat yourself to a nice dinner without checking your bank balance 3 times afterward. This ability to enjoy modest indulgences without financial panic indicates something crucial. You've achieved healthy financial balance where money serves your life rather than controlling it. In the prosperous trading districts where merchants built sustainable businesses through a careful balance of investment and enjoyment, there lived two equally successful traders who had accumulated similar wealth through years of disciplined commerce. However, their approaches to managing prosperity revealed dramatically different relationships with abundance that would determine their long-term happiness and continued success. The first merchant, known as the Balanced Prosperity Manager, understood that wealth creation required both strategic investment and sustainable enjoyment. While he carefully allocated the majority of his earnings toward business expansion and future security, he also designated specific portions for present-moment pleasures that enhanced his quality of life and motivation to continue building wealth. The Balanced Prosperity Manager would occasionally purchase quality meals, comfortable clothing, or small conveniences that brought genuine satisfaction without compromising his long-term financial goals. He approached these expenditures with confidence and joy, recognizing that sustainable wealth building required maintaining enthusiasm for both the journey and the destinations. The second merchant, called the Anxious Hoarder, had become so obsessed with accumulating wealth that he could no longer enjoy any fruits of success. Despite possessing substantial resources, the anxious hoarder would experience severe guilt and anxiety whenever he considered spending money on anything beyond absolute survival necessities. The anxious hoarder's extreme restriction created a painful paradox. He worked tirelessly to build wealth, but derived no satisfaction from his achievements because he could never allow himself to enjoy modest rewards. His fear of spending became so consuming that he lost sight of why he was building wealth in the first place, creating a joyless existence focused entirely on accumulation without purpose. Over time, the anxious hoarder's approach became unsustainable because his complete denial of enjoyment led to burnout, resentment, and eventual abandonment of wealth-building activities entirely. Meanwhile, the balanced prosperity manager's ability to enjoy small rewards maintained his motivation and created a sustainable approach to long-term prosperity. Here's what that story reveals about financial wellness. Guilt-free small purchases indicate you found a healthy balance between saving for tomorrow and living today. This psychological freedom shows you're financially secure enough to enjoy life while building wealth. But managing current pleasures is just the beginning. This next sign shows sophisticated financial thinking that most people never develop. Sign 5. Your debt is manageable or strategic. The fifth sign your finances are better than you think is that your debt doesn't control your life. Maybe you have a mortgage that's building equity, student loans that increased your earning potential, or credit card balances you're systematically paying down without losing sleep. The key isn't having zero debt. It's having debt that either serves a strategic purpose or remains within your ability to manage comfortably. This sophisticated relationship with borrowing indicates financial maturity that many people never achieve. In the expanding commercial empire, where ambitious builders constructed infrastructure projects that would serve communities for generations, there lived two construction leaders who needed substantial resources to complete their visions. Both men faced the choice of how to acquire the necessary materials and equipment when their current savings fell short of project requirements. The first builder, known as the strategic bridge creator, carefully analyzed different borrowing options to determine which debts could actually accelerate his wealth-building goals. He secured loans to purchase high-quality tools that would increase his productivity for decades, borrowed money to acquire prime construction sites that would appreciate in value, and took calculated risks on projects that would generate ongoing income streams exceeding his borrowing costs. The strategic bridge creator's borrowed resources enabled him to build bridges, roads, and buildings that created lasting value far beyond their initial cost. His strategic debt transformed into assets that generated income, served community needs, and positioned him for even greater future opportunities. Each borrowing decision was evaluated based on whether the debt would pay for itself through increased earning capacity or asset appreciation. The second builder, called the debt trap victim, approached borrowing as a solution to immediate desires rather than strategic wealth building. He used credit to purchase expensive materials that provided no lasting value, borrowed money for elaborate celebrations and personal comforts, and accumulated debts that served only temporary satisfaction without creating any ongoing benefits. The debt trap victim's borrowing decisions created mounting obligations that consumed increasing portions of his income without generating corresponding value. His debts became millstones that prevented wealth building and created constant financial pressure because they demanded payments without providing any return on investment. Years later, the strategic bridge creators calculated borrowing had built an empire of valuable assets and income streams, while the debt trap victim remained trapped by obligations that provided no lasting benefit and prevented any real progress toward financial freedom. Here's what that story reveals about debt management. Mortgages, strategic business loans, and education debt can be wealth-building tools when managed properly. The ability to service debt payments without stress shows you're financially in control, rather than controlled by your obligations. All of the above becomes even more impressive when combined with this next sign of advanced financial planning. Sign 6. You're automatically building wealth. The sixth sign that your finances are healthier than you realize is that you're automatically building wealth. Even if the amount seems small, maybe you have $25 automatically transferred to savings each month. Contribute to a 401k, even if it's just 3%. Or have a small investment account that grows without your daily attention. You might dismiss these as insignificant, but any automated wealth building puts you dramatically ahead of most Americans. The sobering reality? Most Americans have absolutely $0 saved for retirement. In the agricultural valleys where communities depended on consistent water supplies to sustain their populations through all seasons, there lived two water system designers who faced the challenge of ensuring reliable water availability for their growing settlements. Both engineers understood the importance of water management, yet their approaches to creating sustainable supply systems would determine their community's long-term survival and prosperity. The first engineer, known as the automated water mill builder, invested significant time and resources into constructing mechanical systems that would operate continuously without requiring his daily presence or manual intervention. His water mills used flowing river currents to power wheels that lifted water into elevated storage tanks, creating a steady accumulation regardless of weather conditions or his personal availability. The automated water mill builder's systems worked tirelessly day and night, consistently adding water to community reserves even while he slept, traveled, or focused on other projects. During busy periods when he couldn't personally manage water collection, his automated systems continued operating reliably, ensuring steady progress toward water security goals. The second engineer, called the manual bucket carrier, believed that water collection required direct personal effort and manual labor. Each day, he would carry buckets from distant water sources to community storage areas through pure physical determination and conscious decision-making about when and how much water to collect. While the manual bucket carrier's approach allowed him complete control over daily water collection activities, it created a fundamental limitation. Water accumulation could only occur when he was actively working. During illness, emergencies, or periods when other responsibilities demanded his attention, water collection completely stopped, leaving his community vulnerable to shortages. Years later, the automated water mill builder's community enjoyed abundant water reserves that had grown steadily regardless of daily circumstances, while the manual bucket carrier's settlement faced frequent shortages because their water supply depended entirely on conscious daily effort. Here's what that story reveals about automated wealth building. Any automatic savings or investments, regardless of amount, work for you 24/7 without requiring daily decisions. This systematic approach puts you ahead of millions who depend entirely on manual wealth building that stops whenever life gets busy. This final sign reveals the most sophisticated financial skill that separates financially mature people from everyone else. Sign 7. You have financial boundaries. The seventh and most telling sign that your finances are better than you think is that you can say no to financial requests from others. Maybe you've declined to lend money to friends, refused to co-sign loans, or avoided investing in questionable schemes pitched by family members. Your ability to protect your financial resources from other people's problems indicates sophisticated money management that most people never develop. The startling truth? 70% of Americans struggle with financial boundaries and regularly compromise their own financial health to help others. In the prosperous kingdoms where territorial boundaries determine the security and sustainability of entire civilizations, there lived two rulers who governed adjacent regions with similar natural resources and population sizes. Both leaders understood the importance of managing their territories, wealth, and resources. Yet their approaches to protecting community assets would create dramatically different outcomes for their people's long-term prosperity and security. The first ruler, known as the Wise Kingdom Protector, established clear, well-defined boundaries around his territory, with strategic gates that allowed selective entry based on legitimate needs and mutual benefit. The Wise Kingdom Protector understood that protecting his people's resources required careful evaluation of all requests for assistance, support, or resource sharing from neighboring territories. While the Wise Kingdom Protector genuinely cared about other communities and wanted to help when possible, he recognized that unlimited generosity would eventually compromise his own people's security and prosperity. His gates remained open to genuine partnerships and mutually beneficial trade relationships, but closed to requests that would drain resources without providing corresponding value. The second ruler, called the Borderless Territory Leader, believed that generosity required accepting all requests for help, regardless of their impact on his own community's well-being. His territory had no protective boundaries, allowing unlimited access to anyone who claimed need or emergency circumstances requiring immediate assistance. The Borderless Territory Leader's approach initially seemed compassionate and generous, but it created a devastating pattern where neighboring communities became dependent on his resources while contributing nothing in return. Word spread throughout the region that his territory would provide unlimited assistance, attracting increasingly demanding requests from communities that had made poor decisions with their own resources. Years later, the Wise Kingdom Protector's territory remained prosperous and secure because strategic boundaries had prevented resource depletion while still enabling beneficial relationships. Meanwhile, the Borderless Territory Leader's community faced poverty and instability because unlimited generosity had attracted those who preferred dependence over self-sufficiency. Here's what that story reveals about financial boundaries. Protecting your money from others' financial problems shows financial maturity that puts you ahead of 70% of Americans who can't say no to financial requests. Your boundaries indicate you understand that helping others requires first securing your own foundation. Now let's bring all 7 signs together to reveal just how financially healthy you really are. There you have it, 7 signs proving your finances are healthier than they feel. Worrying about money shows financial consciousness that puts you ahead of unconscious spenders. Having any emergency options beats the 40% of Americans who can't cover $400 emergencies. Avoiding paycheck-to-paycheck living puts you ahead of 64% who can't. Affording small luxuries without guilt indicates healthy financial balance. Managing debt strategically shows financial sophistication. Automatically building wealth in any amount beats the majority with zero retirement savings. And having financial boundaries separates you from 70% who can't protect their money from others. Here's the perspective shift you need. You're likely doing significantly better than you think, and better than most Americans. Social media lies to you about what financial success looks like. The real indicators aren't flashy. They're the steady, boring signs of financial health you probably already possess. Your challenge starting today: acknowledge your financial wins instead of focusing only on what you lack. Which sign surprised you most and made you realize you're doing better than you thought? Comment below with your biggest takeaway. And if this changed how you see your financial situation, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos that turn financial awareness into confidence. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, sometimes the biggest barrier to financial success is not recognizing the progress you've already made.